masks will drop. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for coming. Cyberdelic and Technofantasy are actually two words that are obsessing me in this past year. I've actually been, I see nice smiles, so I'm already certain that this will somehow turn out well. Good. Cyberdelic and Technofantasy are two things that have obsessed me partially in this year and slightly from the course of my life. Actually, the first term that I bumped into was Technofantasy when I still used to play this game called Mutant Chronicles, which defined its whole ambiance effectively as Technofantasy. I thought it was a lovely, lovely word, and I keep it very, very close to my heart. The whole thing effectively evolved in the course of time with me defining Warhammer 40,000, for those who know what it is, as Technofantasy. Warhammer 40,000 will return in the various bits and pieces that I'm trying to piece together. Cyberdelic is actually a more recent word and a little bit hidden, which was part of a movement from the 90s, which has now been revitalized as an organization by Carl Hayden Smith, a man who's also strongly informed my research into the whole area of technofantasy and cyberdelic. But to go a little bit more in depth in what it is that I do, I essentially study postmodern, contemporary, shamanic or ceremonial magic movements, and my work is prevalently ethnographic. So it's an excuse to go to rave parties and techno parties and a way to do field work. But don't get me wrong, you can absolutely extract some serious work and research on what the conceptualization of consciousness is, what animism is, which I also found a very interesting distinction between the Western vision of animism in this postmodernity and the maybe more Japanese, or let's call it, in this very orientalistic way, oriental vision of what consciousness is and what animism is. But technofantasy and cyberdelic, I will refer to them mostly as my working terms. There's not necessarily a whole movement of technofantasy or cyberdelicness out there. These are terms that are effectively used, but I now see them more as emerging phenomenons within the framework of postmodern esotericism. So, I would actually wanted to start with techno-shamanism. I absolutely love this picture. I try to use this character as much as I can in my presentations. He's actually called DJ Techno-Shaman. So he actually incarnates the fullest image of what the techno-shaman is. And he also incarnates, for me, the archetype of what a nice techno-shaman would look like, even within a cyberpunk kind of environment. But to bring you up to speed, what is techno-shamanism? It is the fusion, effectively, of what we would call our contemporary technology with more traditional animistic flavors and aesthetics. Now, the term techno-shamanism is a little bit controversial because then we would have to go exactly in what the meaning of technology and application of technology is. Is technology really anti-tribal? Is technology really in conflict with the whole shamanistic traditions? No, it is not. And for multiple reasons. Even so-called traditional shamans nowadays, and even this tantric shaman that I met down in Sicily, they have absolutely no problems putting on a phone with a recording of the music that they need in the background. Even this other girl from Korea who comes from this Bhutto family, she said her uncle, who's a shaman, absolutely uses music recorded. Even more contemporary ayahuasca rituals that I have seen effectively use these technological means. You will see plastic cups. You don't necessarily see empty coconuts or vine leaves or things pieced together. Techno-shamanism effectively takes this to the next level, and as I will explain later, I believe that it's connected to a kind of unconscious or underlying desire for reinforced enchantment. And in this particular context, I will also detail what the concepts of enchantment are and what I feel that the concepts of enchantment are pursued. And the inspiration is actually drawn from psychedelic experiences, or the reconstruction and comparison of various psychedelic experiences and trip reports. Let it just be known that techno-shamanism within this particular festival context is more strongly rooted in the idea of empowering or improvement of pre-existing technologies. So we've discovered that psytrance and techno effectively puts the brain in a particular state of mind, which in the broader chaos magic or contemporary state would be an appropriate altered state of consciousness, or the Gnostic state, necessary for contacting and interacting with the spirits. What happens here is that It's just enhanced through technological means. So drugs improve, the rituals improve, the music somewhat improves. Thus we have a more hybrided contemporary version of what shamanism is. And in my opinion, an attempt to re-enchant the Western world with a by now forgotten or at least lost sense of enchantment. Technomancy is a contemporary movement. You can find most of it on Reddit, which effectively enjoys uniting technology like electronic technology with spirit connections or spirit contacts. You will see manifestations of this not just in, let's say, our world, but also in the comic book world is the non plus ultra of the manifestation of this fusion of technology and magic, or the spiritual and the technological. However, there are attempts even today, and there are various means in which it's done. For example, listening to the whirring of machines as a way to enter an altered state of consciousness, connecting oneself to electronics in such a way as to expand one's consciousness by direct materialistic interconnection with that device. Recently, I was reading, which I also connect to the whole field of technomancy and techno-shamanism, a paper from the journal Dance Cult. If everybody knows what it is, it doesn't matter. It's a journal for research in electronic music and its connection with religion. Very, very nice. And in it, it was detailing how some artists effectively enjoy smoking weed and blowing the weed smoke onto the machine or the device that they're effectively using to mix, because it is a way of creating a kind of pranic, energetic connection with the machine. So your consciousness expands to the machine connects itself with your own consciousness, and by this connection you're able to create music together. Other things are, for example, burying discs in the ground so that the earth will corrode the disc, and this corrosion of the disc and of the material will also translate to a form of music which will be dirtier and earthier and, well, more in tune, and it will create this kind of connection between matter and inorganic matter. So consciousness. Today we have various definitions of consciousness. Consciousness can be awareness of self-awareness, perception of an object, consciousness of information. Then there's obviously interior, insider consciousness, exterior, outsider consciousness. Interviewing people and interacting with various techno-shamans or even just simply ravers who have adopted these ideas, and interestingly enough, this element of psychedelics, and I have not determined how much priming works in this sense, but I have observed that effectively many people who are not really well versed in literature concerning psychedelics and technology do seem to experience the same feelings of expansion and connection with objects, this breaking down of barriers, this elimination of the ego element. So I would say that many people do experience this consciousness as something which is somehow limited by your body shape, but which can be broken through the use of psychedelics or through the use of frenetic dancing, which would lead to a state of trance. There are still debates within the community as to whether consciousness is inside of yourself, it's outside of yourself. There are obviously various schools of thought. Not every single psychedelic or techno-shaman necessarily takes the world as animated. Some would more tend to conceptualize it as an anthropocentric perspective, which would expand towards the outside and maybe connect to this outer immaterial universe. As I said, there are various schools of thoughts, but also the ideas keep changing constantly with every new experience and with every new interaction or with every new technology or with every new discovery. So psychedelics, effectively, and I'm not the first one to say this, are effectively envisioned as a form of technology. They are, or technology of transcendence, I think, is a term that Christopher Partridge uses in this particular means, because psychedelics effectively become this kind of extension or a telescope or a cleaning agent which would break down the limits that we have in our own perception so as to be able to see things which are, let's say, there, but we are unable to see. Then there's various explanations as to why we can't see them. Some say, well, if you're constantly in a psychedelic state, it's probably closer to psychosis. It's impossible for you to live on the material plane. And thus, it's actually better to have psychedelics every now and again, or to have these kinds of experiences every now and again, as opposed to constantly. Now, the debate then becomes, there are various forms of enlightenment, ego death, which of these is more preferable as opposed to another, what is necessary, what is not necessary. However, psychedelics still remain this kind of fundamental tool, and direct experience also remains a fundamental tool. On top of that, I would like to say that psychedelics, like the object itself, seem to be the gospel of the psychedelic or cyberdelic technological movement, exactly because direct experimentation is more important as a cultural and group formation than the acquisition of intellectual knowledges or like bookish knowledge. So the interesting thing with technology is exactly that technology does have the function to extend our capacities for influence if we want to consider consciousness in that sense. I can certainly expand my field of reach or my capacity to be perceived even just by this material that I'm using now, these pictures. You don't have to imagine what I'm saying. I can project these ideas directly in your head. And even if I speak online or something like that, my capacity for reaching certainly extends beyond what anybody could have achieved before. These things do go hand in hand. So psychedelics do become both a technology for expansion and coupled with other more digital technologies. And digital technologies are the things which I would place the most emphasis on when it comes to cyberdelics and technofantasy environments, which are being reconstructed within these festival scenes. Technology really goes hand in hand with these kinds of means. Now you can have these kind of giant rituals where you get everybody involved, and if you've ever happened to be in Ozora or one of these giant festivals with these enormous stages, you can see them from above. They effectively look like giant circuitries or giant ritual spaces, which is exactly what they attempt to achieve. Art. I decided to go with this head theme through the whole presentation. I liked the point of art, well, because I always feel that within this sense of, or context of disillusionment, art always seems to take a little bit of the backdrop, but I would actually like to point out that art plays a fundamental role within the technomancy and the cyberdelic environment, as well as any kind of psychedelic context, because it seems to be a better transmitter of information, direct perceptive information, rather than the simple word is. You will find plenty of aesthetic expressions, fusion of man and machine. DJ Technomancer, like you saw at the beginning, is one of these prime examples. You see him, you immediately have the idea of what is going on. Various paintings, various portraits. Alex Gray, I'll just go back. This is Alex Gray for those who don't know him. And this painting is fundamentally influenced, I think, by DMT, hefty doses of DMT repeatedly and in the course of time, which give these ideas of the occult body. Okay, here we're more at an ego decapitation thing, but okay, we can debate it. So art, especially visual art, and of course musical art, these are the most direct of the senses that we do effectively use. Also because when it comes to, say, psychedelics, eating doesn't really seem to be such a primary thing, because your perception of flavor and maybe of smells is so altered that you cannot really enjoy anything of that kind. Usually eating is something that you do before the effective experience, so as, well, you're not depleted of energy during probably the course of the night. Then, and here is where we come to the concept of enchantment. This is Disney World. And the reason that I wanted to talk about enchantment and the functionality that this new movement has is exactly because it seems to fix a kind of problem with disenchantment that we have. I'm not saying that, and now disenchantment has gone away, we're all healed. No, 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 no. What I'm saying is that it seems to fulfill certain criteria that at least the Western positivistic mind wants. Problem with skepticism and problem with connecting with the other. Reading again texts by, say, Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, or reading again Terence McKenna and seeing all the comparisons that they make, it seems to me that enchantment is more or less defined within the psychedelic state as something very, very shiny. Because it's shiny, it is very archetypical. Because it's bright, it is very, very dreamlike, even Darkness somehow becomes brighter and lighter. And everything also seems to acquire a very, very strong sense of meaning or aliveness. I mean, even when you're even in contexts which are, say, for example, someone's room, or just being at home, or just being in a certain space, or in a garden, or even a place that is well known, things that we would take for granted all of a sudden become enlightened. Well, yeah, let's say enlightened, like the world becomes enlightened. And bright and shiny, and it's almost as if you would see it for the first time. As if you were a child, all these barriers, all these limits seem to drop down. And in the reconstruction of what Aldous Huxley would say, I'm not exactly sure how much I would agree with his descriptions, but they did put a very interesting thought in my head. He goes back to, for example, Plato and the world of ideas and all these archetypes, and he points out how in all these more ancient texts, the other world or the superior world or these ideal worlds where rivers flow of milk and honey, everything is always brighter than the ordinary world. Everything is always shinier than the ordinary world. Somehow, this shininess has seemed to have exited everyday life, and thanks to research from that man in the corner there, which got me also to think a little bit, I felt, yes, video games and pop art are absolutely replete with enchantment, and I cannot get this thing out of my head. If you're playing World of Warcraft or something like that, you drink the magic potion. How do you know that it's magical? Shine. You know, the aura comes up, and you have different kinds of auras and shininess to say, oh, it's green, no, it's red, it's the health potion, and if it's blue, it's the mana potion, and it's green, it's maybe stamina or you're poisoned, you're magically poisoned, things like that. So it was very interesting to see, aha, look where our sense of enchantment has escaped. And this is why I'm talking about something is bright and it's shiny. It is alive. Now, how did I see these ideas emerge in art mostly? I'm obsessed with Grant Morrison. Just so as you know, you'll probably hear me talk about Grant Morrison again and The Invisibles and blah, blah, blah. But today I would actually like to talk about a different comic book by him, which is Flex Mentallo. Put very briefly, it's the story of an incredibly muscular man who can alter reality by flexing his muscles rather than using his head. It wanted to be a kind of matter over mind joke. But in it, he lives in this world, which is maybe ours, maybe not, and all the superheroes have vanished. And so he has to be on the hunt to look for all the superheroes. And what he discovers by the end of the story is that superheroes maybe or maybe do not exist, and in reality, they are entities from a parallel universe which was collapsing, and the only way that they had to survive was to teleport themselves in our brains, and we go a little bit back to your presentation there. The only way they could do that is by teleporting themselves into our brains and for us to put them on paper. So it would be this kind of very interesting manifestation. And I thought, wow, look at how imagination and enchantment, look at how it works. Look at how we're attempting to create all these kinds of enchanted phenomena. Look at how we're trying to bring them into our own world through these technological means. Look at how we're trying to enliven or bring enchantment back into our life through technological means. Now, why was I saying that this is a specific Western European vision, why it's more connected to this? Because when I was in Japan recently for a conference, I was just talking to a local, and he absolutely said, yes, for us, you know, this is animated, there is maybe a spirit. And I thought, aha, look at that. We have the whole necessity to put something electronic to make it come shiny and alive, somehow more empowered. They already have this concept of animism. It's a very, very Western positivistic way or attempt to re-enchant reality. Will it be successful? This is something for the future. Certainly, it will have some kind of influence for us. Well, let's find out how much. Do I have enough time to speak?
Depends on how much time you want to answer questions.
Okay. 20 minutes is up. Okay, well, I'll be very quick. Science fiction narratives appear. Often there's this idea of flying towards the skies. I would also like to underline that the worlds which I'm talking about are fundamentally internal. All the ritualizations are effectively doorways to try and reach these science fiction narratives which have to do with asking what if, questioning and pushing boundaries. in the use of technologies, but at the same time, they're replete with fantasy narratives or hero journeys. So the pursuit of technology is always some kind of pursuit of finding the self in some way. So the element of esotericism is always this kind of transcendence. It's never this attempt of just having a party, or we can use a party to get closer to God. It's this kind of more Dionysiac kind of element. And okay, of course, worlds of DMT, ayahuasca, each of these open up different realities. However, they will always take you to some kind of shinier, brighter, and more enhanced vision of what we have of our ordinary reality. I've already spoken about technology and animism. Yes, well, these were examples of cyberdelic and technofantasy, or what I would label as cyberdelic and technofantasy, as a kind of visual externalization of our inner worlds when it comes to the field of cyberdelics. And that's it. So you maybe have time to ask questions if you feel like it. Thank you.
Humanity's close ties to the ocean are sinking deeper.